So before creating our chat application in Django, first of all, let's go ahead and let's learn something about Django channels. That is, what Django channels exactly are and what role do they play while building a chat application in Django. So in order to understand Django channels, let's first take a look at how Django basically works. So usually Django uses the HTTP protocol for communication between client and a server. So whenever you create a Django application, typically what happens is you're using HTTP, and HTTP is a basic protocol that works between a client and a server. So a client typically makes a request to the server and the server sends back an appropriate response. So for example, when inside of a Django application, you type in a URL into a browser, the client, that is your browser, is essentially making a request to the server. And now the server has to respond back, and hence the server actually renders up a web page or it renders up a particular view. So this is how the basic HTTP protocol is, and this is how it operates. However, channels do not use HTTP. Instead, they use a protocol like WebSocket. So in case of building a chat application, you could have multiple clients connected to a server. So for example, let's say you want to create a chat application for 50 people. So there are going to be 50 clients and there needs to be one single server. Now in this particular case, you cannot use HTTP because the protocol here needs to be different because there are multiple clients connected together to a single server. And these clients have to actually communicate with each other and along with the server as well. Henceforth, in this particular case, we use a protocol which is called as a WebSocket. Now, what WebSockets allow you to do is that it allows bidirectional communication between the server and the client. So what do we exactly mean by a bidirectional communication? So in HTTP, a client has to request for something for the server, and then the server has to respond back. However, in a WebSocket, a server could also send a request to the client as well. And the server could push data to the client without even the client requesting for that data. So in a chat application, typically all the clients are connected to a single server, and let's say if client 1 sends a message, that message hits the server now takes all of those messages and it sends it to all the other clients even if they have not requested for that particular message. So this is how bidirectional communication takes place inside of a WebSocket, unlike the other protocol like HTTP. With WebSockets, a server could communicate with multiple clients at once. So as mentioned in the previous statement, the server could broadcast a single message to multiple clients all at once. Channels use Django's native async support, and it allows us to run HTTP and WebSockets. So while using channels, you don't just have to get stuck using WebSockets, but along with using WebSockets, you could also use HTTP requests as well. So that means you could do both. That is, you could add chat supports and you could also make HTTP requests as well inside your Django applications. So for all the applications where you need a chat-like functionality, for example, like a chat box, or you're creating a radio application, there you could use WebSockets. And where you have to implement the basic client and server communication, so on and so forth, in there you could go ahead and use HTTP. So this actually preserves the synchronous nature of Django, and with channels we could build a completely synchronous or an asynchronous application, or we could also build a combination of both of these. So the HTTP protocol is a synchronous protocol where the server has to wait for the client request, or the client has to wait for the server's response even before passing in another request. But in case of WebSockets, a WebSocket is asynchronous. That means a client could send as many number of requests as they want, and the server could do the same. And this kind of communication happens bidirectionally, and they don't have to wait for each other. In addition to this, channels also provide integration with Django's authentication system. That means you could actually go ahead and make use of the Django's authentication system functionality, like logging in the user, registering the user, authenticating them, so on and so forth. And on the side, at the same time, also make use of WebSockets, which allow you to build asynchronous chat application. So this was a basic overview of what exactly channels are. So essentially consider channels to be something which makes your Django applications asynchronous and something which allows bidirectional communication, which is required to build a chat application. So once you have a brief idea of what exactly channels are, from the next lecture onwards, let's go ahead and let's start building the chat application.